I think most stories are pretty linear. You got your cast, and the narrator or someone should tell you right away which people you're supposed to like and which ones you're not supposed to like. Or maybe, plot twist, you were supposed to like someone who was actually bad. Whatever. But either way, it's usually pretty straightforward. Friend or foe, friend then foe, foe then friend, but never friend and foe. I think I heard somewhere that the narrative of a story should guide your emotions. If you're ever confused, like, how am I supposed to feel about this? Then you're watching something pretty bad. Or you could be watching one of my videos. I like the shit like that. You have to decide first where you're being led, and then decide again whether you want to follow that path that the guy is taking you on. I ran into this dilemma when I was doing research for this video. I read Rameau's Nephew. It's a story about one Mr. Philosopher who's sitting at a cafe and starts up a chat with some asshole kid that is a big old scoundrel. You're supposed to hate this guy, is what I picked up. One of those nasty folk. He wants to indulge and steal and cheat his way through life and butts heads with the moral and more even-keeled Mr. Philosopher guy whose name is weirdly not mentioned in their conversation. That's the whole book, just one big dialogue between them. You, common listener, as well as me, are supposed to assume the role of Mr. Philosopher, the narrator. We should all disagree with Rameau's nephew, this brat kid, because we are normal people who agree with basic morality, like snitches get stitches, or life is more than money, fill in any other good Plato quotes you have. So we take on this perspective of Mr. Philosopher, who's cool and logical and also our narrator. And then this snot-nose comes along and says some abrasive shit. Immediately, we don't like him. You, me, and Mr. Philosopher, we're all like, what the hell is wrong with this troubled lad? The entire dialogue from this point on then seems to be to confuse the shit out of the reader's opinion. Slowly, author-man, Denis Diderot, I figured I should probably mention his name at some point, author-man tries to make us, good and honest folk, into apologists for this asshole kid. The bigger picture is that around Rameau's nephew's crassness and diabolicacy, there is insecurity and humility. This kid sucks, but he reflects on all of his suckiness and the question of right versus wrong and why he acts the way he does. If you wouldn't believe it, he's still a human being, and he is passionate about art, a focal point of the conversation. Music and orchestra. Kind of nerdy, but we'll play ball. This kid is evil, but behind a thick wall of ego, he has responsibilities and shit. He feels nature has trapped him in this cycle of moral corruption and poverty, so I at least felt like I was being made to question my own dislike for this guy, whether it was fair or not. Admittedly, he doesn't exactly strive to defy his nature of sucking, but maybe, says the author, maybe Rameau's nephew has some good defenses for his morality, or lack of it. The narrative wants you to think maybe people aren't such a black and white picture that we make them out to be. I say baloney. I won't fall into these narrative tricks of character development and nuance. The narrative wants you, me and Mr. Philosopher, to have a mixed opinion about Rameau's nephew. So to once again muddle the story, I wanted to go through some of the arguments Mr. Rameau, meaning his nephew, who is also referred to as Rameau, like Rameau's nephew is still Rameau because it's a family name, right? What he brings to the table, to judge for ourselves whether this man is as complex as he seems to be made out to be. Number one, Rameau tells a story about when he was once propped up by a rich lady in like a palace or something. He was like a jester guy, he told funny stories and did pranks in exchange for getting food and clothes and shit. So one of his duties that he had to do on the side is that whenever there's a new play released, he needed to hunt down the author and be like, you know who would be great in your play? This one lady I know. You should allow my lord lady person to act in your play. Rameau, though, does not like this job because, she's kind of a bad actor. So he has to take out these writers to dinner to schmooze them up, and they'll just argue with him and think he's stupid for recommending this lord lady person. And he finds this job humiliating, to be rejected and laughed at. This is why he thinks it's only fair to talk that good behind her back and spread rumors and shit. Admittedly, it probably doesn't help out his job to sell people on her acting when he continually stokes smear campaigns against her, but I digress. The philosopher narrator guy, of course, takes issue with this and says, it's indecent, to say the least, to ridicule your benefactors. Rameau has two comebacks. The first is essentially to be like, the lady was indecent first by making me humiliate myself. Not a great argument, right? It's kind of an agreement. You get food and clothes, you do a job for them. That makes sense. Plus, there's no guarantee that it's humiliating, and it doesn't excuse Rameau to do bad things in return, even if it was. Two wrongs don't make a right kind of thing? Sure. But the second defense is less childlike. I'm just going to read it. This generation, man, you got to feed them books down the gullet these days, right? And as for those who expect to have honest dealings with people who were born wicked, and talking about himself, born wicked, and whose characters are vile and abject, are they being wise? Everything has to be paid for in this world. There are two public prosecutors, and one of them is at your door punishing crimes against society. The other is nature herself. She's familiar with all those vices that escape the law. If you go in for debauchery in women, you'll get dropsy. If you're venal, you'll get consumption. If you invite rogues into your house and surround yourself with them, you'll be betrayed, made a fool of, and despised. The easiest thing to do is to resign yourself to the fairness of these judgments. Say to yourself, fair enough. Shake yourself down and mend your ways. Or stay as you are, albeit in accordance with the aforementioned conditions. I'm not a doctor, but it sounds like karma. Rameau wants to escape morality with the claim that his lord ladyship should be one with nature, to live and let be, go with the flow. And if she feeds the likes of Rameau, who is vile and abject, then she may as well eat shit and die. It's a good argument, right? Rameau calls this a tacit agreement. If you recognize that Rameau is morally bankrupt and you still choose to associate with him, he is not liable, since you would have known about the risks. This tacit agreement is part of what becomes his caged tiger argument. If you're stupid enough to put your finger through the cage of a tiger, then you should expect your finger to be chomped off a good portion of the time. You could yell and scream at the tiger all you want. The tiger is too violent. He's not as nice as he is fluffy. What the hell? But no matter how much moralizing you do, the tiger will always be a tiger. The tiger will always be a dangerous animal. Don't waste your time thinking reason will change that fact. Now you have two choices. Get upset that the tigers are the way they are, or accept that you won't be able to safely touch tigers ever. The caged tiger argument is strong, I think. It has hints of stoicism with rich undertones of the Tao, maybe. You can't focus on things that you cannot change. Focus instead of working in tune with your environment, rather than disrupting it. Don't fuck with tigers. Okay, we get it, sure. If this lord lady wanted to get her act together, maybe be a little bit more pragmatic and employ an actual promoter rather than a troublemaker and reasoning that he should just stop making trouble. Mr. Philosopher in the book agrees wholly. He says, you're right. So my problem, because really that's all I want to talk about, my problem is probably the same as your problem. If hearing out that argument pissed you off, it's not with the caged tiger argument, but whether the caged tiger applies to our rascally Rameau. The most glaring point is that Rameau is not a tiger. His brain is at least slightly bigger and slightly more complex. He is much more capable of reasoning and acting morally, even if he chooses not to. This capacity for change is what makes people agree that he should still be accountable for his actions. I think most normal people would agree that everyone should be held to the same standard, and just because Rameau thinks he's born wicked doesn't mean that he should be treated any less harsh for said wickedness. But let's suppose Rameau's evil is innate. He has no autonomy in the matter, he can't do anything about it, he just loves talking that good shit and can never change. It then makes sense that he has resigned himself to that fact, and defends his actions by claiming we should resign ourselves to that fact as well. Should we judge Rameau then? If we pretend he really cannot change? I mean, if we're thinking pragmatically, judging people is only useful when it makes them uncomfortable enough to change who they are. I think that's the purpose anyway. But if Rameau here refuses to budge on his nastiness, I can't think of a good reason for hating him. I'm a firm believer that hating people can get pretty exhausting, and if it can't make a difference, then what's it for? His argument is bad because he wants to pretend he's a tiger and he's not. But if he thinks he is, and I can't do anything about his self-perception, then I don't know. Is it wrong to hate him? Probably not, but I like my hate to serve a purpose. I think this is the conclusion Mr. Philosopher makes as well, but again, I don't know. The author has made me think, I don't know, feels good, right? This ties into big argument number 2, which is, what's the point of morality anyway? In his conversation, Rameau mentions how Socrates is dead. Socrates, famous philosopher, wanted to teach all the good people about good things, or what makes a thing good. But his Athenian peers said, you can't do that, and made him die in the court of all that is fair and right. They felt his philosophy wasn't exactly on brand with what the gods would respect. Kind of a dick, to be honest, kind of unfair. But the point is, no matter how virtuous Socrates was, he died all the same. It didn't get him out of or save him from any of the problems in his society. This is why Rameau would much prefer to indulge in life's fortunes as his priority rather than trying to navigate what is good and bad or just and unjust, especially if morality is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. This is now when Mr. Philosopher takes his turn to pop off. He retorts that there will always be good laws that make peace and bad laws which perpetuate prejudice. The reason to care about all that shit is that morality will slowly filter the bad all the while the good persists. Morality allows the good stuff to bubble up to the top over time. And then, to complicate everything again, he brings up a would you rather, the tool of all great men, and asks, good guy that doesn't do much with his life, or bad guy that creates masterpieces? I would think he'd be on team good guy. You do good, and if everyone did that, everyone would be happy, right? Wrong. This MFer was on team bad guy. What? Philosopher argues that society will always be a mixed bag. Some people will be nice, some people will be mean, but you need game changers, even if they are mean, to make lasting progress for humanity. A nice but insignificant guy can only benefit the people around him and only during his life, whereas a mean but important person will hurt the people around them and during their life, but benefit the rest of the people yet to come. It gives utilitarian vibes. Greatest good over good for goodness sake kind of thing. The writing was pretty good for this part. Let me give you a little snipper again. He is a mighty tree who starved some other trees growing nearby and stifled the plants at his feet. But his own crown reached the sky. His branches stretched out wide. He provided welcome shade for those who came, still come, and always will come in search of rest by his majestic trunk. The fruit he gave were exquisite, and they keep growing back. Rameau, of course, disagreed and offered his input. Well, the good guy would share his wealth with me, so that would be preferred. But Mr. Philosopher's final advice is then to accept first, take good with the bad, and realize what is necessary. That kind of ties his 2 points together. If we accept the world for what it is, slowly morality and justice win, and also we can acknowledge the lasting contributions of sometimes immoral people. I would still prefer to take a bunch of nice people over meanies, though. I'm gonna be honest. Primarily because I don't think it's so easy to quantify what human progress is. Like Bro says, we need great geniuses to compose good songs. The example of human progress is people being able to bop out to some tunes. Like, what? Where's the people solving hunger and shit? Nice people or mean people but have classical music? Either way, I like the system of accepting first, then reflecting on how to improve. We attribute morality to so many things. A lot of the time it's like stamp of approval or wrong, move on. There's not a whole lot of taking good with the bad going on. I like this especially because it circles back to something I've covered before, the insider cynic. The idea is to be cynical and say, look, people kind of suck, but there's not a whole lot I can do about that. And things get better with time, so we just gotta accept how things are by taking the good with the bad. There's no reason to reject society outright because we can cynically exist and contribute from inside the system, even if it may be a little immoral. Weirdly, this is also Rameau's conclusion in their conversation. The kid comes up with this quote: "The wisdom of Rabelais' monk is best for his own peace of mind and for everyone else's. Do one's duty as far as possible, always have a good word for the reverend prior, and let the world follow its fancy. The world is fine as it is, because the magnitude is happy with it." Of course, this is a little too far in that direction. Rameau basically saying to do nothing at all to create change. This makes sense given that he wants to be a tiger and not a person, but it still agrees with the premise. The balance is between Rameau's tiger people, which have no autonomy, and the philosophers great fellows who have too much autonomy. We aren't tigers, of course, but we also can't make statues out of everyone that disagrees with the norm. We can't all want to change everything about the way things are, right? There has to be a balance. Judge what things are capable of change, and then what consequences of changing them might be. Okay, thanks. Bye.